The land remembers what people forget. Dr. Eris Thorne had once considered that sentiment a geologist's poetry, a quiet acknowledgement of rock and sediment holding eons of unwritten history. Now, it felt more like a warning. The wind that scoured the New Mexico high desert carried more than dust. It carried the ghosts of promises and the weight of secrets her own family had been tasked to keep. She stood on the porch of the dilapidated ranch house, the deed in her hand feeling as flimsy as her finances. Behind her, inside the house that smelled of sun-baked wood and her great uncle's pipe tobacco, her son Leo was sullenly unpacking his life into a single small room. 2 months ago, Eris had been a senior geologist for an oil and gas firm in Houston, respected, solvent, if perpetually tired. Then came the downturn, the restructuring, the bloodless corporate email that had severed her career. The eviction notice had followed like a faithful hound. In that sterile, beige apartment, surrounded by boxes she couldn't afford to move, the letter from a New Mexico law firm had arrived. An inheritance. A great-uncle, Elias Thorne, a man she recalled only as a gruff whisper from a childhood long past, had left her his property, 40 acres of scrub and rock adjacent to a decommissioned Cold War missile silo. It was, the lawyer had politely implied, a tax burden with little resale value. To Eris, it was the only lifeboat in sight. She'd sold her car to pay the back taxes and afford a U-Haul, driving for 2 days with a silent, resentful 15-year-old. Leo had plugged in his headphones the moment they left the Texas state line, his disappointment a palpable force in the cramped truck cab. He was a city kid, thriving on debate club and fast internet, and she had dragged him to the literal middle of nowhere. The guilt was a physical ache in her chest, sharp and constant. She had failed him. This desolate ranch was not an adventure. It was the landscape of her failure. Their first trip into the nearest town, a dusty settlement called Redemption, did little to lift her spirits. At the town's only diner, a man with a chest like a barrel and a crisp Air Force insignia tattooed on his forearm watched them from a corner booth. He sat with 2 other men, all of them possessing the quiet, observant stillness of veterans. When Eris went to pay, the man approached the counter. His handshake was firm, his eyes a piercing blue. "You must be Elias's kin," he said. It wasn't a question. "I'm Mitch. We kept an eye on him. On the place." "Eris Thorne. This is my son, Leo," she said, gesturing to where Leo was poking at a slice of pie. He was a good man, kept to himself, but he was sharp. "Knew the history of this place better than anyone," Mitch said, his gaze lingering on her for a moment. "Some histories are worth protecting." He offered a curt nod and returned to his friends, leaving Eris with a vague sense of being evaluated, of stepping into a role she didn't understand. The days that followed were a blur of dust and discovery. The ranch house was a time capsule, every surface covered in books, not just geology, but cryptography, southwestern history, colonial Spanish law. Elias Thorne had not been a simple recluse. He had been a scholar. His notes were meticulous, his handwriting a dense, elegant script. Eris felt a strange kinship with the man, a shared respect for the quiet truths hidden in archives and rock strata. While she sorted through the academic clutter, Leo, consumed by terminal boredom, took to exploring the property. "Mom, come look at this," he called out one afternoon, his voice losing its resentful edge for the first time in weeks. He stood near an old, dry well, pointing at the ground. "The blueprints you found show the well and the pump house, but not this." This was a perfectly flat, unnaturally smooth expanse of rock about 20 feet square. To a casual observer, it was just a patch of barren ground. But to Eris's trained eye, it was an anomaly. The texture was wrong, the composition alien. It wasn't native sandstone. She knelt, her fingers tracing the surface. It was concrete, cleverly stained and textured to mimic the surrounding landscape. "This wasn't formed here," she whispered, her scientific curiosity overriding her exhaustion. "It was poured." Leo, his interest now fully engaged, ran his hands along the edge where the slab met the dirt. His fingers caught on something, a thin, recessed metal ring, almost completely obscured by packed earth. Together, they dug around it, unearthing the rusted edge of a heavy steel door set flush with the concrete. A crude, manual winch mechanism was hidden beneath a flat stone nearby. It took their combined weight and several grunting, sweat-soaked attempts to turn the crank. With a groan of protesting metal, the underground door lifted just enough for them to slide it open. It was never on the blueprints. It was something else entirely. The air that rose from the opening was cool and dry, smelling of stone and stillness. A set of steep concrete steps led down into darkness. Using a flashlight from the truck, Eris descended, Leo close behind her. The space was small, a 10-by-10 antechamber. It was empty, save for a single, heavy, military-style footlocker sitting in the center of the floor. On top of it was a thick, yellowed envelope. Eris's name was written on it in her gray tunkle's hand. Her fingers trembled as she broke the wax seal. The letter inside was short, its message a thunderclap that shook the foundations of her world. "My dearest kin," it began. "If you are reading this, then you are the one I have been waiting for. This land is not a burden, it is a trust. What it holds is more than just property. It is a history, a truth that powerful men have sought to bury for over a century. You are its new guardian. The choice to accept that responsibility is yours, but know that you will not be left to face it alone. The land remembers, and so do its friends. Your first key lies within the box. Be wary of those who speak of the future to make you forget the past." Leo read the letter over her shoulder, his eyes wide. What does it mean? A key to what? Before Eris could answer, a sound from above made them both freeze, the crunch of tires on the gravel driveway. A sleek, black SUV, impossibly clean in the dusty landscape, had pulled up to the house. A man in a sharp suit, his smile as polished and out of place as his vehicle, was walking towards the porch. Instinctively, Eris pulled the heavy door shut, plunging them back into darkness. They waited, their hearts hammering in the silent, subterranean space. After a few moments of tense silence, Eris pushed the door open a crack and climbed out, gesturing for Leo to stay put. She brushed the dust from her jeans and walked towards the stranger, her mind racing. The man extended a hand. "Dr. Eris Thorne? My name is Jonathan Pike. I'm with the acquisitions department for Thorne Dynamics." His smile was wide and empty. "I know this is sudden, but we have a proposition for you." Thorne Dynamics. Eris knew the name. A titan in defense contracting and technology, founded by a different branch of the Thorne family generations ago. They were infamous for their aggressive expansion. "We're planning a new tech campus in the area," Pike continued, his gaze sweeping over the dilapidated ranch house with thinly veiled disdain. "A sort of executive retreat. Your parcel is inconveniently located. We need the access it provides to the old silo service road. We're prepared to offer you $500,000 for the property. A generous offer, I think you'll agree, for a parcel of this nature." The number hung in the air, shimmering like a desert mirage. $500,000. It was an escape. It was a new life for her and Leo, security, an end to the gnawing anxiety that kept her awake at night. All she had to do was sign a piece of paper and walk away from a mystery she had stumbled upon only minutes before. But Elias's letter was a fresh wound in her mind. "Be wary of those who speak of the future to make you forget the past." "I'm not interested in selling," Eris said, her own voice surprising her with its firmness. Pike's smile faltered for a fraction of a second. "Dr. Thorne, perhaps you don't understand. This is a life-changing sum of money. There are complications with owning land out here. Permitting issues, environmental surveys. It can become very expensive for a private citizen." The veiled threat was as clear as the desert sky. "Thank you for your offer, Mr. Pike," Eris said, crossing her arms. "My answer is no." The lawyer's eyes hardened. He handed her a business card. "My employer is a very determined man. The offer stands. For now." He turned without another word, climbed back into his SUV, and drove away, leaving a cloud of dust and menace in his wake. Leo emerged from the underground chamber, his face pale. $500,000? Mom, are you crazy? "Maybe," Eris said, her eyes fixed on the dust cloud receding towards the highway. "Or maybe I'm finally starting to understand what we're really sitting on." That night, they opened the footlocker. Inside, nestled in velvet lining, was not a key, but a heavy, bronze disc covered in intricate symbols and a series of rotating rings, like a complex combination lock. Beside it lay another of Elias's journals. This one was different, filled with coded entries, historical diagrams, and repeated references to something called the concordance. Eris, remembering Mitch's words, felt a surge of adrenaline. This was no longer about a worthless inheritance. It was a puzzle, a legacy. She took high-resolution photos of the bronze disc and, after finding a weak but usable cell signal on a nearby mesa, emailed them to a name from her past. Dr. Lena Petrova, a brilliant, famously eccentric historian at the University of New Mexico she had collaborated with on a geomythology paper years ago. Lena's reply came within the hour. It was a single, frantic line. Do not sell. Do not talk to anyone. I'm on my way. 2 days later, a helicopter descended from the sky, its blades whipping the desert floor into a frenzy. It did not land at the small municipal airport, but on a patch of flat land just beyond Eris's property line. A man in his late 60s, with a mane of silver hair and an aura of absolute authority, stepped out and strode towards the fence. He was followed by Jonathan Pike, who looked profoundly uncomfortable. Eris, who had been alerted to the helicopter's approach by a call from Mitch, met him at the barbed wire fence. "Dr. Thorne," the man said, his voice a low rumble of command. "I am Marcus Thorne. I believe we are distantly related." He gestured impatiently at the ranch. "My company needs this land." Pike's offer was an insult. "I'll give you $2 million. Cash." It was a staggering sum, an absurd valuation for this patch of earth. His desperation was a tangible thing. "Why is this specific piece of land so important to you, Mr. Thorne?" Eris asked, her hands gripping the rusted wire of the fence. "My family has had an interest in this valley for generations," he said, his eyes scanning the property not with a developer's gaze, but with a hunter's. "We believe its potential has been overlooked. Your great-uncle understood. He was a stubborn man. He refused to sell to my father, and to me, for 40 years. So the pressure was not new. It was generational. My great-uncle entrusted this land to me," Eris said. "I intend to honor that trust. It's not for sale." Marcus Thorne's face darkened into a mask of cold fury. "Everything is for sale, doctor. You are a geologist. You understand pressure. Sooner or later, everything breaks." He turned and marched back to his helicopter, leaving Eris with a chilling certainty that the fight had just begun. Later that day, Lena Petrova arrived in a dust-covered Subaru, her energy filling the small house. She examined the bronze disc with a reverence that bordered on religious fervor. "This is a provincial cipher lock, late 18th or early 19th century," she breathed. "The symbols relate to astronomical alignments and local tribal folklore. It's a key, Eris, a conceptual key. The concordance, it was rumored to be a secret pact between Spanish clergy, Mexican officials, and native leaders to hide culturally priceless artifacts during the turmoil of the Mexican-American War. Things they feared would be stolen or destroyed. Ledgers, original land grants, sacred objects. It was thought to be a myth. Guided by Lena's historical expertise and Elias's cryptic journal entries, they began to decipher the puzzle. The disc was a map, its coordinates tied to constellations and landscape features. That night, with Mitch and his 2 friends standing watch, their quiet presence a comforting shield, they followed the map to the old, crumbling barn. Under a loose floorboard marked with a faint, carved star, they found a cavity. Inside, wrapped in oilcloth, was the first cache. It was not gold or jewels, but something far more valuable: leather-bound ledgers, maps, and a sheaf of documents. As Lena carefully examined the papers under the glow of a lantern, her breath hitched. "Eris, this is it. This is proof. This ledger details the contents of the entire hidden collection. And this," she held up a brittle document. "This is an affidavit from 1885, signed by a circuit judge. It states that Thaddeus Thorne, Marcus Thorne's great-grandfather, attempted to seize this very land from your ancestor, Jonathan Thorne, using fraudulent papers. Jonathan fought him in court and won. Marcus isn't just trying to buy your land. He's trying to reclaim a family defeat." The news spread through the official channels Lena activated. An investigator from the New Mexico Attorney General's office, a calm, methodical man named Mr. Chun, arrived to review the documents. His office, he explained, had an open investigation into Thorne dynamics for predatory land acquisition practices across the state. Eris's evidence was a bombshell. Just as this new, formal alliance was taking shape, Eris received an anonymous email. It was from a disposable, encrypted account. "I am an archivist at Thorn Dynamics," it read. "Marcus Thorn is not looking for land. He is looking for a single item he believes is part of a larger family treasure on that property, his great-grandfather's personal Bible. He believes it contains a map to this treasure. He has authorized his security division to retrieve it by any means necessary. Be careful." The whistleblower, a young woman named Sarah whose family had served the Thorns for generations, had risked everything to send that warning. The escalation came 2 nights later. Eris was jolted awake by a frantic call from Mitch. "There's a fire, Eris. Down by the barn." She ran outside, her heart seizing with terror. Flames licked at the dry brush near the barn's foundation, casting a demonic glow against the night sky. Mitch and his crew were already there, beating back the flames with shovels and fire extinguishers they kept in their trucks for just such an emergency. It was over in minutes. The fire contained before it could do real damage, but the message was unmistakable. It wasn't meant to destroy the barn, just to create a panic, a diversion, a way to scare her into submission. This was a criminal act. Any thought Eris had of a simple, clean resolution burned away with the scorched earth. The attack had an unintended consequence. At his grandfather's sprawling Santa Fe estate, Marcus Thorn's teenage grandson overheard a hushed, angry phone call. He heard the words containment, minor fire, and the Thorn woman, the boy, already troubled by his grandfather's increasing obsession, felt a knot of dread. He was a gamer and knew from online forums that a kid named Leo, who was also a history buff, had just moved to Redemption. Taking a wild chance, he found Leo's profile and sent a cryptic message. "Your ranch. It's not about money. My grandfather is looking for an old family Bible. He thinks it's the key." "I'm sorry." Leo showed the message to Eris. "A Bible," he said. "Why would it be here?" Suddenly, it clicked. Elias's letter. "Your first key lies within the box." But Elias wasn't just a historian. He was family. He wasn't talking about Thaddeus Thorn's Bible, Eris said, her voice trembling with realization. He was talking about his own. They raced back into the house, to the bookshelf where Elias's personal collection sat. Tucked between volumes on cartography was a simple, leather-bound Bible. It looked ordinary, but when Eris opened it, a small, flat brass key fell from between the pages of the Book of Psalms. Tucked into the back cover was a folded piece of paper. It wasn't a map, but an architectural diagram of the ranch house itself, showing a hidden space beneath the stone hearth of the main fireplace, accessible only with the key she now held. With Lena and Mr. Chun present as witnesses, Eris found the keyhole, hidden within the mortar of the hearth. The lock turned, and a section of the stone floor slid away, revealing another dark, narrow staircase. This chamber was smaller, drier, and lined with meticulously organized shelves. It held artifacts that made Lena gasp: pottery, textiles, silver ornaments. And in the very center, on a small wooden pedestal, sat a worn leather satchel. Inside was not a map. There was no treasure. There was only a stack of letters, tied with a faded ribbon. Eris carefully opened the top one. The script was delicate, feminine, the date from 1860. It was written by Marcus Thorn's great-grandmother, Eleanor Thorn. But it was not addressed to her husband, Thaddeus. It was a love letter addressed to Eris's own great-great-uncle, Jonathan Thorn, the guardian. Eris read the words aloud, her voice shaking. Eleanor wrote of her husband's coldness and cruelty. She wrote of the secret comfort and love she had found with Jonathan. And then came the final, devastating truth. "My dearest Jonathan," she wrote, "Thaddeus will never know that the son I carry is not his. He will be raised a thorn, with all the power and poison that name carries. But in his heart, I pray he has your goodness. I pray that one day, our bloodline will heal the wounds this land has suffered." Marcus Thorn was not the descendant of the villain, Thaddeus. He was the descendant of the hero, Jonathan. He and Eris shared the same blood, the same ancestor. The entire multi-generational conflict, the corporate avarice, the relentless pressure, it was all a tragic, misguided attempt to reclaim a legacy that was already his, but in a way he could never have imagined. Mr. Chin stood in stunned silence. This changed everything. It was no longer a legal case. It was a reckoning. The next morning, Eris Thorn, no longer a desperate victim but the executor of a profound truth, walked into the glass and steel headquarters of Thorn Dynamics. Flanked by Mr. Chun and Dr. Petrova, she was escorted to the main boardroom where Marcus Thorn was holding a crisis meeting about the failed intimidation attempt. The air was thick with tension. Marcus saw her and stood, his face a thundercloud. "I don't know what kind of game you think you're playing, Doctor, but it ends now. I am prepared to offer you $5 million. That is my final offer. Take it, or I will use the full resources of my corporation to bury you in litigation for the rest of your life." Eris walked calmly to the head of the long, polished table. She looked at the circle of expectant, hostile faces. "I'm not here to sell, Mr. Thorn, and I'm not here to sue you." She paused, letting the silence stretch. "The history your family has been trying to acquire for a century is safe. I am proposing we form a partnership, a foundation funded by you, managed by a board including myself and Dr. Petrova, overseen by the state. We will preserve the collection and the land, and create a center for historical education and research, open to the public. We will tell the true story of this place. All of it." Marcus Thorn laughed, a harsh, dismissive sound. "You have nothing. A few old papers. You think you can blackmail me?" "This isn't blackmail," Eris said softly. She reached into her briefcase and pulled out the sealed, leather-bound satchel of letters. She didn't open it. She didn't read it to the board. She slid it across the gleaming wood of the conference table until it stopped directly in front of him. "This isn't for them," she said, her voice steady and clear. "It's for you. It's your history. A history you deserve to know." His eyes locked on the satchel, then on her face. He saw no triumph in her expression, no malice. He saw only a quiet, profound certainty. With a trembling hand, he picked up the satchel, broke the brittle seal, and began to read the first letter from his great-grandmother. The boardroom, the lawyers, the entire corporate empire around him seemed to dissolve. The color drained from his face. His carefully constructed identity, built on a foundation of power, legacy, and a century of perceived wrongs, shattered into a million pieces. The man who had everything stared down at the faded script and, for the first time, understood he had nothing that truly mattered. 3 years later, the desert sun shone down on the Thorn Heritage Center. The old ranch house had been beautifully restored as its centerpiece, and new, low-profile adobe buildings housed galleries, a research library, and classrooms. It was a beacon of learning and reconciliation, a place where the complex, interwoven histories of the Southwest were told with honesty and respect. Eris Thorn, as the center's director, stood on the main veranda, watching a group of students listen intently to a guide. Leo, now a history major at the University of New Mexico and a summer intern at the center, came and stood beside her. He looked happy, purposeful. "He's here," Leo said quietly. Eris turned. Marcus Thorn was walking towards them. He had retired from his company the day after that boardroom meeting. He was thinner now, his movements slower, the arrogance in his posture replaced by a deep, weary humility. He had poured his personal fortune into the foundation, working alongside Eris with a convert zeal. He stopped before her, his eyes falling on the central exhibit visible through the glass doors, a display dedicated to Jonathan Thorn and Eleanor Thorn, their stories finally intertwined. "I spent my whole life trying to conquer a history that was already in my blood," he said, his voice raspy with emotion. "I tried to possess it when all I needed to do was understand it." He looked at Eris, a long, searching look that acknowledged their shared, complicated ancestry. "Thank you," he said, "for giving me the truth, instead of the victory you were owed." Eris simply nodded, a sense of profound peace settling over her. The guilt that had haunted her for so long was gone, replaced by a deep sense of purpose. She had not just found a home for her son, she had reclaimed a legacy for generations. As the sun began to set, casting long shadows across the valley, she thought of her great-uncle's words, now no longer a warning, but a promise. The land remembers what people forget, and sometimes, if they are very lucky, it gives them a chance to remember it together.